Good morning, church. Got a lot of folks traveling and need to keep them in our prayers, but so grateful for every one of you who are here this morning. I hope you've all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I'm wondering how many of you are still eating turkey? You know, we didn't have turkey this year. We just had a brisket that was fixed by a guy he was in these brisket cook-offs, barbecue cook-offs, and usually wins like top 10 in the country. So we were really not blessed as well as you are with the turkey this year. But man, that brisket's good. The event that Americans often refer to as the first Thanksgiving was actually celebrated because of the first harvest that they had in the New World, and they actually celebrated it in October of 1621. And that feast lasted for 3 days. There was someone who actually recorded some things about the event. His name was Edward Winslow, and he informs us that in attendance were 90 Native Americans and only 53 pilgrims, which is interesting because there were about 130 pilgrims that were on the Mayflower, which means only about 40% of the people that came from England survived that first year. And at one point, there were only 7 people who were even well enough to take care of the rest of them. But their losses did not prevent them from being grateful. And so this morning, that's what I want us to talk about for just a little bit, is gratitude, thanksgiving. And to do so, I want to take us to a story that's found in Luke chapter 17. This story is about a man that I want to emulate in my life. We don't even know his name, but he was special. He was unique. It says this about it. The story begins this way. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. 10 men from differing backgrounds, drawn together by a common tragedy. They are lepers. Now, normally, Jews would not associate with Samaritans. We know that from other places in Scripture, from history. They wouldn't associate, but a common misfortune has broken down these barriers, nationalistic barriers, racial barriers. Leprosy was a dreaded disease. The prognosis was a horrible death. The first outward sign was a ringworm-looking kind of a place on one's skin, but that sign only was there after work had been done for a long time from the inside. And a leper might live with the disease for 20 or 30 years, but those years were miserable. Lepers literally live in a body they watch fall apart. And some of the strains of leprosy are highly contagious, which explains the provision that's made in the law of Moses that says this: anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." How would you like that to be your greeting to people? As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. Now, as is common, the tradition of the elders, which was traditions that they added to the law of Moses, but according to the tradition of the elders, if a leper was windward, that leper had to stay at least 50 yards from everybody else. So I measured our auditorium, and from the exit sign over the doorway there to there is about 50 yards. That's as close as you, a leper, could ever come to another human being that was not a leper. That means your wife, your children. It'd be a miserable experience. Isolated, total outcasts. And all 10 of these men had the same condition. And they were hopeless. Now, notice how this account, as Luke tells it, it aligns perfectly with what we just read in the law of Moses. It says, they stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. And then notice how Jesus even works within the framework of the tradition. When it says, when he saw them, he said, go, show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. You see, only a priest could declare a leper to be clean. Only a priest could make the untouchable touchable again. And so I want you to imagine as they're following Jesus' instruction, he tells them to go, and they go. And as they follow his instruction, they're healed as they go on their way. And maybe something like this happened. Maybe as they're going along, one of them looks at the other and says, hey, Fred, man, you don't have leprosy anymore. And then he looks down at his own hands and he says, hey, neither do I. Now, what would you do if you were in that situation? It is so easy for us to be critical of these men. Let's remember, they probably haven't seen their wife. They haven't been able to touch their wife in years. Their children may have grown up since they've been able to touch them. And so, hey, they're probably thinking, I can't wait to see my family again. Man, I'm ready to hit it. Look out, world, here I come. But one of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And then Luke makes sure to remind us, and he was a Samaritan. All 10 are healed. Only one says thank you. There will be time to go to the priest. There will be time to be reacquainted with family. There will be time to get back to life as I once knew it, to get back to society. But first, praise and thanks are in order. And so that's the scenario. 10 lepers come to be healed, and only one of them offers thanks. 9 take that precious gift and go on their way. All of them are healed under the same circumstances. But this is something important when it comes to gratitude, is for us to understand that real gratitude is seldom born of our circumstances. And further, a materialistic culture like the one that we live in, that encourages constant wanting and sees possessions as a source of happiness, is not the most fertile ground for gratitude to take place. Let me give you an example of this. We read in the Bible that Solomon was, at the time of his time here on earth, was one of the richest men in the world. And we might think about that and say something like, wow, he was really fortunate. But I want you to consider this. Solomon never enjoyed the benefits of electricity. In those hot summers in Israel, he didn't have air conditioning. When it was cool in those Israel winter nights, he didn't have heating. He never had he never had a telephone, never had a car, never flew in an airplane, never experienced a flushing toilet, never had a faucet that he could turn on and have hot water. He never tasted chocolate chip cookies. You know, that's a New World thing, chocolate. And when he got a cold, he couldn't go down to the pharmacy and get some medicine. He never watched TV, never sent a text. And the fact is, he never experienced the kind of luxury that you and I, everyone in here, gets to experience. So, I want us to spend just a few moments in self-reflection this morning, and I don't want to do it in a way that feels like a guilt trip on us, but it's always good for us to just pause and to take an account of where we are in our lives. How much do you live in gratitude? Gratitude is a cultivated emotion. I'm ashamed to even say this, but I'm only recently discovering this. Gratitude isn't something you wait on until everything's going great. Gratitude is something that we cultivate in our lives. It comes with intention. The old songs that we used to sing, "Count Your Many Blessings," it got it right. We need to just stop and realize how blessed we are no matter what our circumstances. And studies show that we can deliberately cultivate gratitude. Gratitude boosts happiness. And further, the beneficial effects of gratitude snowball over time. There have been brain scans that have been done on people while they are in the midst of being grateful that shows that it has lasting effects on our prefrontal cortex part of our brain. And this heightens sensitivity to future experiences of gratitude. So literally, gratitude pays itself forward. So let me begin by suggesting this to us. Gratitude has to be spoken. It's not something you just keep inside. Gratitude has to be spoken. You probably heard of Rudyard Kipling. He lived from 1865 to 1936. And although he was English, he was actually born in Bombay, India. We know him for the poems he wrote, for the books he wrote, like Captain Courageous and the book Kim, and all of us know about Jungle Book. He was an extremely wealthy writer. In fact, there was a reporter who came to him one day and said, "I've just read that someone's figured out that every word you have written is worth over $100. Now, you think about that over 100 years ago. That was a lot of money because he wrote some pretty long books. And so this reporter said, let me just ask you this. I've got $100 in my pocket. Let me give you $100 and you give me one of your words. So he took the $100 out and gave it to him. He stuck it in his pocket, and Kipling said, "Thanks." Now, that's not really what I'm talking about speaking thanks. But this Samaritan leper in our story is the one who spoke thanks. Gratitude is a thankful appreciation. Grateful people recognize that the source of the goodness in their lives, for the most part, comes outside of themselves. Gratitude helps us to focus on what we have instead of on what we lack. And although it may feel contrived at first, it might even feel somewhat phony at first, just stick with it, and it grows more real and it grows stronger with practice. It's important that we identify the three enemies of gratitude, and they all begin with a C. They are comparing, complaining, and coveting. When we allow these things to happen in our hearts, it is an unhealthy place. Our souls suffer as a result. So let's understand this. Life's blessings are not a right we have. Life's blessings are a privilege we have. I don't have a right to good health. I don't have a right to a good family. I don't have a right to a great job. I don't have a right to a life that never experiences any ups and downs. These are privileges for which we are to be thankful. Why are we Americans so favored? Is it because God owes us something as Americans? And how many of you even chose to be an American? No, it's a great privilege that we have, a great blessing. And that is a call for us Americans to be filled all the more with gratitude. And yet, do you know, every survey I've read over the last 10 years or so says that we Americans are among the most unhappy people in the world. Is there something wrong with that picture? There's a preacher that I used to listen to a lot in my early years of preaching. Some of you know him. His name was Charles Hodge. And Hodge once told this story about a church that needed some additional parking. And so next door was a vacant lot, and the church tried to buy it, but the owner of the lot wouldn't sell it. But what he did is he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You can use this lot as if it were yours, except one Sunday a year. And on that one Sunday a year, you can't use it at all. And someone asked him, well, why? And he said, I just want you to remember that you don't own it. So Hodge said, every year, that church was reminded of their neighbor's grace, and that church was also reminded of their need to be thankful, rather than to take their privilege for granted. Let's go back to our story. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? I mean, can't you just feel his heart drop as he says this? King Lear said, how sharper than a serpent's tooth is it to have a thankless child? I think Jesus must have felt that right here. It's far too easy for us to receive God's blessings and then just go on our way back to our routines as if nothing's ever happened. But here's something we need to not miss in this story. It's too easy for us to read across it because our English translations don't do the best at telling us the end of this story. Because to just receive our blessing and then go on our way means that we might miss out on the greater blessing. Then Jesus said to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. That word well in Greek is the same word that's translated saved. And what it literally means is to be made whole, to be made complete. You see, Jesus didn't come to this earth simply to heal people of their illnesses. If that's what he came for, he would have built a hospital. No, Jesus came so that we could be made well, complete, whole. A cursory reading of this passage would make us wonder, well, weren't they all made well? To which the answer would be yes. But there's something different about this man. They were made well from their leprosy. They were healed of their leprosy. This man was made whole. You with me? And he was made whole because he lived out of gratitude. So, I'm getting ready to end my sermon, for which you ought to be very grateful. And if you're not, I can go on for another 20 minutes if that's what we need to do. I'm kidding. But I do want to close with this passage. And I'm reading it from the Message. It's 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 23. And I don't have it on the screen. I just want you to listen to this verse. May God himself, the God who makes everything holy and whole, make you holy and whole. Put you together, spirit, soul, and body, and keep you fit for the coming of our Master Jesus Christ. The one who called you is completely dependable. If he said it, he'll do it. And that's good news, and that is something that ought to cause every one of us to not only be grateful at this season, but to live out of gratitude. So we offer an opportunity for you to come if you need to come to be baptized, if you have a prayer need at this season, or if you want to go and visit with an elder and his wife in room 102. We provide that time for you now. Let's stand together and let's sing.